Hello and welcome to Hard Talk India. The recent terrorist attacks in America and Washington's determination to hit back have created both a window of opportunity as well as a problem for India. For years the country has experienced what it calls Pakistani-sponsored militant violence, but it hasn't got the recognition it wants from the United States. Is that now about to change, or could there be fresh reasons for overlooking it? With me to answer these and other questions is India's powerful Home Minister, Lal Krishna Advani. Mr. Advani, the Americans have declared war on terrorism. Is this a war in which you feel your country can participate?
I think the Prime Minister's letter to the American President, his personal talk with him on telephone, has made it amply clear that we have always regarded terrorism as a global menace. And we have always, for the last 4 years that we've been in government, been pressing for a global response. And now that President Bush himself has said that he would like the international community to come together and fight this menace, India's response can only be positive.
So you are in a sense shoulder to shoulder with America.
That's right.
In which case, with every passing day, it seems more and more likely that America is readying itself for a military strike against Afghanistan. What sort of steps are you prepared to take to assist them?
After all, in this particular situation, America is in the vanguard. And so the precise course of events, the strategy which has to be evolved, has to be by America mainly. And in that context, we have already communicated to them that we would be willing to play our role.
But you're waiting for specific requests. Is that your position?
A request in general terms has been made. As Home Minister, I can say that in specific terms also, interchange of intelligence inputs has been requested, and we have agreed to that.
There is, of course, a lot of newspaper reportage about what you are willing to do, both in America, in the Washington Post, and in India, in the Times of India. Can you confirm that your government is prepared to let American forces use Indian military bases, particularly 3 that are mentioned, Avandipur, Adampur, and Jamnagar?
There has been no specific request in that regard, and no specific decision also has been taken by the government. We would respond as and when the time arises.
Are you suggesting that you wouldn't be against making this facility available if they asked for it?
Our assessment is that they may not need it.
But if they do?
It would be considered.
In other words, you're not saying it's out of the question?
I'm not saying anything.
Okay. What about the possibility of the stationing of troops, whether American or multinational, on Indian soil? Would that be acceptable?
It has not happened before except once, perhaps in 63, 64, and I don't think any such need would arise. But as I have already said, that we regard the present situation as being a kind of situation we had been asking for, namely that the world realizes that it is not only India that is facing this evil, but a time may come when any country, other country of the world also may be in a similar predicament, and therefore we have been pressing for the last 4 years that there has to be a global strategy for it.
And as you say, you're willing to play your role, that was your phrase, and the door is open to consider whatever America wants. There's no question of saying no beforehand.
There is no question of saying either no or yes beforehand unless the specific proposal is put forth to us. After all, every country is very much concerned about its own sovereignty and about its own part in any decision taken which it seeks to implement. And as I said, in this particular matter, It all depends upon the nature of consultation that India is involved in when such a decision is taken.
You're treading very cautiously, and in a sense that's understandable, but how much of this is conditioned by the fact that the left parties in particular, and some of your own allies in government like Sampan DMK, have reservations about the role India should play?
Some parties have a reservation because inbuilt in their political thinking over decades has been a measure of anti-Americanism. But some other reservations have been expressed by people who are understandably very touchy about any invasions of national sovereignty, and in that regard even the government would be.
Let me put it like this: if it came to a test of Indian support, would you be restricted and restrained by these sentiments, or would you tackle them head on and convince them of the need to support America?
I think what has been said by the Prime Minister in his public utterance, in his public address to the nation, what has been communicated to America already, I think there are no doubts in the mind of America that in a battle against terrorism, India would not hesitate.
Okay, let's then turn to the situation in Afghanistan. As America readies itself for attack, the Afghans are saying that this would be unjustified. They insist that the Taliban and Osama bin Laden in particular are not guilty of attacking America. From what's been told to you, do you believe the Americans have sufficient proof to hold bin Laden guilty?
What proof it precisely has is with America. But the statements made till now, the media coverage of these events does make every Indian believe that it may be the truth.
And you are one of those Indians?
That's right.
Would you also go further and say that given bin Laden's involvement in the militant violence that you experience regularly in Kashmir, you're not really looking for proof? Him being taken out would be in our interest regardless when it happens and how.
I would agree with that. Because as I said it a few days back, India's experience of militancy, of terrorism, has been of a kind in which, though the leading party has been Pakistan, but Pakistan has been working in tandem with the Taliban, and often we found that the terrorists whom we apprehended or killed had on their person pictures of bin Laden, and he was adored as a hero, worshipped literally.
He's your enemy number one, just as he's America's.
Our enemy number one is terrorism, irrespective of the country to which he belongs, irrespective of the country from which he operates.
When this strike happens, would you prefer it to happen under the aegis of the United Nations, or would you be prepared to participate in an American-led initiative?
This is a matter in which I would say that it would be better if it was the UN and aegis, but I am also aware that in the United Nations there are countries which can exercise a veto, and therefore all these considerations have to be taken into account, which is at the moment in the lead.
Let's come to Pakistan, because in a sense the situation around Pakistan is perhaps the most interesting from your point of view. The BBC has repeatedly reported that Pakistan has set conditions for its support to America. Colin Powell has said that he understands Pakistan's sensitivities. Yet the American ambassador in Delhi has said there are no conditions attached to Pakistani support. So what is the truth?
The American ambassador has met the foreign minister, he's met me, and he has also strongly emphasized that the situation that America is facing today, it is not going to negotiate with any country in terms of terms and conditions. And he gave me a categoric assurance that our fight is not against any specific country or a specific individual. Our fight is against terrorism. And I happened to go through one of the speeches made by the American president, and it struck me as very significant. When he visited Pentagon, President Bush, addressing the employees, said the focus right now is on Osama bin Laden. No question about it. He is the prime suspect and his organization. But there are other terrorists in the world. There are people who hate freedom. This is a fight for freedom. This is a fight to say to the freedom-loving people of the world, we will not allow ourselves to be terrorized by somebody who thinks they can hit and hide in some cave somewhere.
It's very interesting that you should read out an excerpt from President Bush's speech, because it draws my mind directly to the anomalous paradox that General Musharraf finds himself in. On the one hand, he said, and I'll quote, "The world must unite to fight against terrorism in all its forms." On the other hand, Pakistan is involved in aiding, financing and supporting and perhaps abetting the militant action that India suffers from. You call those people terrorists, Pakistan calls them freedom fighters. How do you explain that paradox?
It's not for me to explain, it's for President Musharraf to explain.
But is it not also now for President Bush to explain? Because suddenly Pakistan has become his frontline ally, and this ally in the fight against terrorism is in fact a country that you believe is behind the militant violence you regularly experience.
So far as America trying to get Pakistan on its side, I would like to take a charitable view of it. Not just a charitable view, but a practical view of it. And which would be that sheer geography dictates this to America, that if you can get Pakistan on your side.
Well, have you made available to America all the proof that you believe substantiates your claim that the militancy, the violence you experience is funded, supported by Pakistan?
Over a period of time, regularly, we've been giving them information that we gather. And I would think that when General Musharraf visited India a couple of months back, my conversation with him, his pronouncements at the meeting he had with editors, they bear out amply what we believe is the approach of most countries who patronize and promote terrorism and try to justify it.
But if you come back to the extract you read from President Bush, he said there are other forms of terrorism, America was concerned about them, and yet none of the Pakistani-based jihadi or militant groups like the Hizbul, the Harkat, the Lakshar, the Jaish-e-Mohammed or the Al-Badr are considered terrorist groups by America. Now, in your eyes, is that double standards?
I would not call it double standards, but I am sure that after the 11th of September, policymakers, decision makers in America would be thinking about all these issues.
How do you
and
know
at
that?
the present point of time, I would not, even while supporting America in its battle against terrorism, like to negotiate, like to strike deals. Maybe some in Pakistan may like to do so, not India.
Let me put this to you. You say you wouldn't like to negotiate, you wouldn't like to strike deals, and I'm sure that's a sentiment that will be appreciated in Washington. Yet the truth of the matter is that despite what happened on September the 11th, America shows no sign in accepting your position that the Pakistan-based jihadi groups are in fact terrorist groups. There's no switch, there's no recognition of that.
I'm not insisting on recognition at this point of time when I am aware that they know it. I do not doubt that they are oblivious of it, or they may have condoned it in the past. But I don't think it will
Forgive
be
the
possible for
interruption.
them.
You're saying something very interesting. You're saying they know it, yet they won't recognize it and admit it. So there are still double standards. Despite their own horrific experience, they won't acknowledge the problem you're facing. That's what you're really saying.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that after 11th September, understandably, their focus is on that country, that force which they regard as the principal suspect for the attack on the World Trade Center or on Pentagon. But as President Bush himself has indicated in his address to the Pentagon employees, there would come a time when something else may happen.
Yes.
If I am not leaving a secret, I can say that my conversation with the US ambassador in New Delhi certainly was reassuring in this regard.
He actually gave you a specific assurance that after Afghanistan and Osama bin Laden have been handled, America will then turn towards the jihadi groups in Pakistan that you consider terrorists?
As I said, I can only say it was reassuring. Nothing beyond that.
But you see, let me put to you a problem. It's not just that America refuses to recognize the groups that you consider terrorists as terrorists. It's that with every passing day, as the relationship between Pakistan and America gets closer and warmer, and as Pakistan becomes a central part of American concerns, America is going to be unlikely to want to ask awkward questions or to embarrass its new frontline ally.
Well, so far as this frontline ally is concerned and its leader is concerned, his condition, the government's condition is totally unenviable.
But I'm not talking about General Musharraf. I'm talking about your faith in America. You're expressing faith that they will turn around eventually and tackle your problem. I'm saying to you that their dependence on America may not permit it.
It depends on so many factors. These things depend upon so many factors. At the moment, I do concede that the focus being on those who have perpetrated the outrage in America is understandable. That doesn't make me have misgivings in my own mind as to what would it be its attitude towards terrorists whom earlier it had ignored.
So what you're saying is help America today in its hour of need, and they will definitely in due course later on turn and help us and recognize our problem too. That's what you're saying.
I think when the President says that you cooperate with us, we'll cooperate with you, we have reason to take it on its face.
But then what do you say to people who argue that it's not just that the present situation has given Pakistan a chance to rehabilitate and re-establish itself in American eyes, but at the same time, India's importance in Washington eyes, both diplomatically and strategically, is going to diminish?
I don't think so. I don't think so, particularly because the bonds that bind America and India are really greater, not because of history. Pakistan's links with America have been because of history, because of the Cold War. But I think that the bonds of democracy and values that link India with America are more enduring, though national interests do sometimes dictate.
And that's what you're relying on?
I'm relying on that.
Let's come back briefly to Pakistan. It's become the new ally of America. It's pledged to join America in fight terrorism. Yet in July, when General Musharraf came to India, he gave you a categoric assurance that Dawood Ibrahim, who is wanted by you for the terrorist attacks that were perpetrated in Bombay in 1992-93, is not living in Pakistan. This month, the Pakistani magazine Newsline has in a substantial cover story proved him wrong. It appears that Ibrahim, according to the magazine, is living in the Karachi district of Clifton. Did the general deceive you?
I think when I confronted him with this issue of Dawood Ibrahim, he first hesitated, and then when he said that he is not in Pakistan, I could see the faces of all the Pakistani officials sitting there along with him. And at least in one respect, Taliban is more forthright. They don't deny that bin Laden is in Afghanistan. They don't say that. And what a contrast it is insofar as General Musharraf is concerned.
So you're saying, in fact, that he lied to you?
Well, it's a choice of words. I would say that he was speaking a patent untruth.
Have you made the Americans aware of it? Because at the very moment when they seem to be accepting him as an ally in the fight against terrorism, have you pointed out that he is sheltering and shielding someone you want for terrorism? He actually has, in this one instance, an Interpol and Europol red alert notice for him.
I don't think this is the right time for rubbing in these points, and these points are known to the Americans. In fact, they would be knowing not merely about Dawood Ibrahim, they would be knowing that as many as 126 criminals who have committed acts of murder, bombing, other such crimes in India, and who have been absconding. Dawood Ibrahim, of course, is the principal absconder in the case of the Bombay blast.
You seem
of
to
93.
be bending over backwards not to ask the Americans awkward questions. Is this because of your faith that if you do, they will eventually turn their attention to your problem? Or is it because you perceive yourself, by a quirk of fate, to have suddenly become helpless? Pakistan's become an ally, a frontline state, and because of an accident of geography, India's on the other side.
When a questioner himself is putting these questions, I don't need to say them. It is the questioner who says that the General Musharraf is a liar. Why should I add to it? It's a fine question for me. But this contrast between what Afghanistan is saying about bin Laden and what Musharraf told me about Dawood Ibrahim is a contrast by itself.
But you see,
I am not at all hesitant about anything. But as I said at the beginning, this is not a time when in the battle against terrorism we are going to strike deals, we are going to negotiate, we are going to bargain. I can understand Pakistan's very curious position at the moment. Today Pakistan is virtually divided into the pro-jihadi forces and the anti-jihadi forces. And by a quirk of fate, General Musharraf, who only the other day called jihadis freedom fighters, may find himself at the head of the anti-jihadi forces in Pakistan.
Let me ask you about him. Do you believe that this position that he's taken of committing himself to fight terrorism is a sincere position, or do you think he's only playing for time?
No, he is not playing for time. He has hardly any option, because he knew that at this point of time, if he were not to listen to America, then the consequence would be that both Taliban as well as Pakistan would have been targets in this battle.
So you're saying that he is sincere, maybe by default because he doesn't have another choice, but he is sincere.
I'm not talking of sincerity or earnestness. If he had been sincere, Agra provided him an opportunity of changing the whole history of this subcontinent and changing the relations between India and Pakistan, and he behaved in a manner as to make him confess when he went back to Islamabad that he has returned from Agra empty-handed.
Let me put this to you. Regardless of what happens, people say that turmoil in Pakistan is going to grow. Perhaps there will be political instability. Some even speculate about the possibility of civil war. Does that worry you?
It is worrisome to this extent that any turmoil in this region can always spill over, can have effects on us. But it is mainly a matter of concern for Pakistan.
And
therefore it is said that I said that his position today is totally unenviable.
And does it worry you that perhaps the first major war of the 21st century could happen in the South Asian region, that the subcontinent could be the theatre of devastation?
Yes, that is a possibility, and yet India feels that the kind of battles that have to be fought to curb terrorism, if this is one such battle, we can contribute, we will contribute despite the risks.
In other words, this is the cost that has to be paid.
That's right.
Mr. Advani, for talking so openly to Hard Talk India, thank you very much indeed.